I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, the FBI has been called in to investigate at least 2 attacks on ballot drop boxes, one of them here in Washington state. Plus, I want to take a few minutes today making a final pitch to undecided voters about pushing for change in our state and the absolute meltdown over the Washington Post deciding not to endorse a presidential candidate. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. Oh gosh, 8 days out. 8 days out from the election. We have a lot to discuss. Really concerning story out of Vancouver, Washington, though. I've got to show you this video. So this is from KATU2, the ABC affiliate in Portland. Ballot drop box on fire in Clark County. This was at the Fisher's Landing Transit Center. Happened about, when was this? Early this morning? Yeah, 4 a.m. The troubling part is that it had been until, I think Saturday, 11 a.m. is the last time ballots were picked up. So they think there was probably hundreds of ballots in there. Most of them cannot be salvaged. And obviously, there's a couple horrifying things. It's clearly an attack on democracy. There was also an attempted arson or something of the sort in Portland. And so Vancouver right across the border from Portland. So sounds like maybe they're related. Don't know for sure. The FBI has been called in to investigate. And so we'll see, what they find. Look, and I pissed off the left-wing internet today because my first thought upon seeing that was left-wing terrorism. I mean, am I wrong, though? I don't give the left-wing Antifa the benefit of the doubt anymore. They're guilty until proven innocent to me. There's only one side of the political aisle that has been lighting crap on fire in our state in Portland for the last 10 years, and that's the far left. And so that's what I said on social media. I said, it looks like left-wing terrorism to me. I mean, this is what happens when you pretend like Antifa doesn't exist and it's not a problem. And look, could it be a right-winger? Sure, I guess. It's in Vancouver. Areas of Vancouver are very blue. And then one of these happened in Portland. Certainly Portland's very blue. But I also, frankly, wouldn't put it past Antifa to try to do something to make it look like MAGA was attacking the elections. There was a story, this was several cycles ago, where it was letters sent to election offices and they were written to sound like they came from MAGA, but it was so obvious that it was some left-winger who had done it to make it look like MAGA. So honestly, again, they're guilty until proven innocent. Is that jumping to a conclusion? 100%. Is it an educated guess based on behavior and actions over a long period of time? Yes, it is. So a couple important things. Here's a story from KATU. Burning ballots pulled from inside smoking. Vancouver ballot box. Hundreds likely damaged. Nicole, I can't read that. Can you get that graphic in the show sheet for me quick? Sorry. One of the things I just want to let you guys know, if you dropped your ballots in the drop box at Fisher's Landing, really at any point over the weekend, you need to check on the status of your ballot at vote.wa.gov to see if it's been accepted, to see if it's been counted. And you need to call the Clark County Election Auditor's Office immediately for a new ballot if it hasn't, and just let them know, hey, I think I dropped this. So according to KATU, the VPD added that the investigation is being fully handed over to the FBI and it will not be providing any more updates. That's the Vancouver Police Department. So this becomes a federal issue. So just a few hours before this happened, Portland police had responded to an arson at a southeast Portland ballot box. Investigators say there that an incendiary device was set off inside the box, causing a fire. The fire was extinguished and the device was cleared. And the Portland Police Bureau is investigating that incident. The status of the ballots in that burn box isn't clear. But the one in Vancouver, they're totally destroyed. I mean, you saw the video of them, digging them out with a rake. Or can you play the video again, Nicole? Digging them out, clearly still on fire and smoldering, and it was raining out, and just... I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. This is the point that we've gotten to, right? No civility, no desire to respect the sanctity of our democratic process. And is it adding fuel to the fire, so to speak, for me to immediately say, oh, left-wing terrorism? Probably. Maybe I shouldn't have jumped to that conclusion. But again, there's only one side that has engaged in acts of extremism like that in Washington state and Oregon for the last 10 years plus. And it is the far left. It is Antifa. So I would not put it past them to do something like that. So again, if you even think there's a possibility that your ballot could have been in that drop box in Vancouver at Fisher's Landing Transit Center, first check on the status of your ballot. If it says it's been received at vote.wa.gov, then you're fine. But if it's pending or whatever, if you're even maybe thinking it could have happened to your ballot, you need to just contact the auditor's office and get a new ballot immediately. And this is talking about possible motives here. I don't know. I have, again, my strong suspicions. But this is in the 3rd congressional district, which we know could be decided by a couple hundred votes. It was exceedingly close in 2022. It's Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez is the Democratic congresswoman in that district, and she's running against Republican Joe Kent. And so certainly it was close in 2022. I imagine, and the polling shows it's going to be very, very close this time. So something like that could actually make a difference. Something like that, burning hundreds of ballots in a drop box, could actually make a difference. So there's this individual incident and making sure that voters go figure out, was my ballot impacted? And then, of course, it's already launched this whole conversation about the safety of ballot drop boxes. That certainly to me has been a better option than putting it in the U.S. mail, because first of all, when you give it to USPS or you put it in a USPS drop box, that's just another kind of third party that's between your ballot getting to where it needs to go. And we've already seen that there's instances last election cycle where a USPS box was out of service. I think it was in Seattle, but it wasn't even marked as out of service. And so people were dropping their drop boxes in there and they never got picked up before election day. And so that's the thing to me, is like, I know they're going to get picked up at the ballot drop box. So that has always seemed like a safer option to me than putting it in USPS and snail mail. And Lord knows if or when they're even going to pick it up and it's going to get to where it's going, just more hands on the ballot. But again, like, I hate to say it, there is nothing stopping somebody from going to one of those ballot drop boxes and dropping in an incendiary device and ruining all the ballots that are in there. There's just not, especially over the weekend when it has been 24, 48 hours since it's been picked up. It can have an impact on elections. And I don't know what they're going to do moving forward. I mean, that's always been a threat, but it's not like they have a police officer to be able to station them at every single drop box in every county across the state of Washington. They're just not going to be able to do it. So the only thing you can do is hope that people who put a ballot in the mail there are aware of this news story and are taking the steps to get a new ballot. But, it kind of feeds into those concerns from Republicans that this is just one more sort of risky element of not doing day of or in-person voting explicitly and strictly. So we'll see what happens here. We'll see what the FBI digs up. And look, if they were right-wingers, then I will come on the show and I'll give a mea culpa. Again, maybe not the most productive thing for me to get on Twitter this morning and see that and immediately be like, Antifa. I'm conditioned. Like, there's been so many stories like this. So we'll have to see what happens. But get those ballots checked, and really anywhere. I don't care where you've put your ballot in the mail, in a drop box, if you've walked into an auditor's office and handed it to them, still go to vote.wa.gov. Make sure you track your ballot and don't stop tracking your ballot until it says your ballot has been counted. And then you can rest easy knowing that that's the case. But just a wild story. And this is already national news, and understandably so. It raises a lot of important questions. And I hopefully they have video somewhere that has its lens trained on that ballot drop box and they can try to figure out what happened. The issue is, though, of course, like, maybe not at that time in the morning, but there's going to be a lot of traffic this close to an election going up to a drop box. So maybe, they'll be able to see who, a bunch of people coming and going, but can you identify the person that dropped something in there that wasn't just a ballot, that was an incendiary device? So bad stuff. So anyway, maybe the left wing was right to freak out at me on Twitter for saying it was Antifa. I have no evidence at all that it was Antifa, except like my brain and independent thought and years of experience of them doing sort of stuff like this. All right, I want to take a few minutes today to make an appeal to voters who are still undecided at this juncture. And I'm not going to talk about national politics. Like, the presidential race is what the presidential race is. I find it very hard to believe that there are too many people out there who have not made up their mind when it comes to Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I'm talking specifically about statewide elections, local elections, and these are the offices and the people who are going to have a more profound impact on your day-to-day life. And I've been telling you guys, I've been doing some door knocking for Dave Reichert, no secret. I'm supporting Dave Reichert for governor. I am supporting all 4 of the Let's Go Washington initiatives. Vote yes to pay less. Most of the choices I made on my ballot were Republicans, although I did vote for a couple Democrats, as I've discussed on this show. Voted for who I thought were the best people for the job. And ultimately, I voted for balance. As an independent, someone who is fiercely independent, I'm supporting Republicans this cycle because the one-party rule thing just isn't working. It isn't working. And I don't know how anyone who is truly independent-minded could see what's happening and believe that it does. You know, we have one party that has been in control of the governor's office for 40 years. We have one political party that has been consolidating power for much of the last 25 years. They've had control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, giving them a complete trifecta to push through their policies for the last 8 legislative sessions and much of the last 20 legislative sessions. So when I look at everything that I am personally frustrated with in the state of Washington, and I think critically and independently about it, I can't blame Republicans for it. And so do I think Republicans are perfect? No. Do I think that there are problems in states where there's complete Republican control? Yes. And that's because whenever you give one political party, which is in essence a corporation that's designed to push its own agenda, not the agenda that works best for you necessarily, whenever you do that, you're going to have problems. I think it's completely antithetical to our democracy and to a government that is where the power is supposed to be inherent in the people. And look, we haven't got here by accident. People gave Democrats that power over a long period of time, slowly and surely. That's the decision that voters in this state have made. But I have to wonder, whether independent-minded voters who might have had their reasons for voting for Democrats over the years are starting to understand the danger in that. And there's a lot of independents. As we've been out door knocking for Dave Reichert, I'm surprised by the amount of doors I go to where people say, I've made up my mind in the presidential race, but I haven't made up my mind in the governor's race, or I'm not really sure how I'm going to vote on the initiatives. They're kind of confusing. So even in 8 days until the election, I think there's a lot of room to convince and appeal to undecided voters about what's going on here. For a lot of undecideds, and I would argue especially women, frankly, I think there are a couple key issues that might be weighing on them. Abortion is one of them. There's a reason why Democrats in the governor's race in particular have focused on abortion, 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 abortion. Dave Reichert, abortion extremist, will take away a woman's right to choose, ad after ad after ad after ad, is because they think that narrative is effective. Now, never mind that it's dishonest. I mean, Dave Reichert he's a Christian. He's made no excuse for the fact that he personally is pro-life, but he has said from the very beginning of his campaign that he's not going to change abortion law in the state, nor could he. And I think that's the important thing that Democrats don't want you to know and want to gloss over, is he actually couldn't do that even if he wanted to. First of all, if Dave Reichert's elected governor, he's going to have to work with a Democrat-controlled House and Senate. There's really no mathematical equation that could hand over control of the House or the Senate to Republicans. It's not going to happen. And so you'd have balanced government. You'd have some checks and balances. And so believing that Dave Reichert could or would erode abortion rights is to believe that Democrats in control of the House and Senate would allow him to do so. So it's a fantasy, but it's a fantasy that Bob Ferguson continues to push, a dark fantasy, on voters with millions of dollars in dishonest TV ads because he believes with undecided voters, women in particular, that might be the thing that persuades them to vote for him and dissuades them from, maybe for the first time ever, voting for a Republican candidate like Dave Reichert, a very moderate Republican. And then, of course, there's the presidential race. I do believe that there are some undecided voters in the state of Washington, based on my conversations at the doors of voters, who are very worried about Donald Trump, who do not like Donald Trump. And so that's the other narrative for that reason that Bob Ferguson has spent millions of dollars pushing on TV. Literally cropped a picture of a MAGA hat onto Dave Reichert and blasted it on TV. Has these spies that go around and record Dave Reichert at his events and take him completely out of context. Dave Reichert is on record many times over saying he's not a fan of Donald Trump, but that doesn't stop Bob Ferguson from saying, again, putting a MAGA hat, literally copy paste on his head and saying, oh, he's a right-wing Trump extremist. And it's because Bob Ferguson knows that those two things can be scary for undecided voters, independent-minded people, and he can't run on his record and on all these other things that are happening in the state of Washington. And so he's focused on those two things. And I would really challenge undecided voters to see past them. And I'm not saying that abortion or Donald Trump and concerns about Donald Trump aren't valid reasons to make up your mind for or against a particular party or a particular candidate. Look, if you value abortion access and just the fact that Dave Reichert is personally pro-life bothers you, I'm not saying that that's not a reason to vote against him. That's up to you and to your values. But when you're considering your values, I want you to, as an independent voter, really ask yourself, okay, look at what's happening in the state of Washington and ask yourself if those things align with your values. Maybe abortion access or someone who's pro-life or someone who is of the same party as Donald Trump, you're saying, that doesn't align with my values. Okay. Does the state of the cities in Washington align with your values? Does it align with your values to allow people, as we have increasingly so, to die with needles in their arms all over our streets and sidewalks? Does it align with your values to allow the level of suffering and death that we have allowed when it comes to the fentanyl crisis and really the heroin crisis before that? Does it align with your values to see people living in filth and squalor on our sidewalks and in our alleyways and on our street corners and in our parks? Does that align with your values? My guess is probably not. Does it align with your values that we have seen absolutely skyrocketing crime and deteriorating businesses? Does it align with your values when you go downtown and you see block after block after block in cities like Seattle boarded up because the business environment and the crime and the homelessness and the drug abuse is just too much for businesses to survive? Does that align with your values? My guess is probably not. Does it align with your values when a woman in her 80s who's walking dogs is pulled from her car, ran over, murdered in broad daylight, and her little dog is taken to a park where it's stabbed to death and thrown in a grocery or in a garbage can by a repeat felon? Does that align with your values? Something that's happening more and more frequently, violent attacks? My guess is probably not. I think of Ina Kwan, who is 8 months pregnant, sitting at a stoplight in a car with her husband, shot to death by, again, somebody who is mentally ill, a known offender, takes the life of her and her unborn child. Does that align with your values? I'm sure it doesn't align with your values. When you're looking at education, we want our kids to get a quality education. Does it align with your values that we're spending more money on education than we ever have before, yet kids are failing at the basics? Reading, writing, math? Does that align with your values? I don't think it aligns with your values. Does it align with your values that in our state they push equity so hard that biological men can compete against girls in sports? My guess is that doesn't align with your values. Does it align with your values that you can have a family with 2 incomes and they still can't afford a place to live? They still struggle to be able to put food on their table and put gas in their car? My guess is that doesn't align with your values either. But those are the realities in Washington under decades of solid Democratic rule. So again, you can look at, and this is what everybody does, right? When they vote, they weigh the things that matter to them and they put it on a scale and they try to figure out, especially independent-minded people, where they fall. And again, I'm not saying the specter of Trump isn't something to consider if that is concerning to you. I'm not saying abortion and abortion access isn't something to consider if that's important to you. But when you look at those two issues that are nearly irrelevant for the state of Washington. Abortion access is long ago codified. Donald Trump, he's been the president before. He can't do too much to Washington state on an individual basis. And then you compare that to all of the very real crises that are happening and have been getting worse and worse in Washington. The scale has to tilt in that direction. Homelessness, substance abuse, mental health, rising crime, a homicide rate that has doubled over the last 12 years since Bob Ferguson was Attorney General, increasing cost of living. All of these things, declining quality of education, declining enrollment in our public schools. And it is the undecided, independent-minded voter who gets to say, enough is enough. Who gets to say, yeah, there's a couple things about Republicans that concern me, but all of these things are far more concerning, far more dangerous, far more deadly than these two issues that people like Bob Ferguson and the Democratic Party have been pushing down our throats using millions of dollars in ads on TV. So that's my plea to undecided, independent-minded voters. It's 4 years. It is 4 years to take a look at what a different style of leadership would do for the state of Washington. It's 4 years when it comes to voting yes on the initiatives, where Democrats are going to be forced to reevaluate their spending and their priorities. You know, we've seen that the tax burden for families is higher than ever. They're spending more of your money than ever. Yet look what we're getting for it. Nothing's getting better. The homeless crisis, the drug crisis, the crime crisis. We have the lowest number of police officers per capita of any state in the nation. And even after all of that, our state is still facing a $5 billion budget deficit. It's because they really have no care or concern for how they're spending your money and making sure it's being spent on things that work, because they continue to pass new taxes that we can repeal by voting yes on the initiatives and sending a message to them that we expect fiscal responsibility. That when we're giving them more money than ever, when they're spending more of our money than ever, well, a lot of working class families are suffering. We expect at least some results for that. But instead, we get a state that's far worse off than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So to people who are on the fence, take a chance, vote for balance, vote for change. And hell, if it doesn't work out, there's going to be another election in 4 years and you can change your mind. But that is really my pitch to you. Don't let them trick you into deciding such an important election based on two issues that they are focused on specifically to scare you, when there are so many much scarier things that are happening on the streets of our state. And man, get your ballot in regardless. I mean, I say that at every door I've been to is like, regardless of how you're going to vote, get your ballot in. But I really hope that there are independent-minded people who look at the totality of what's going on and think twice about voting for the same people who got us into this place. All right. Something fun that popped up over the weekend. I got a text from someone saying, hey, did you see Barack Obama in Atlanta? And I said, no, I wasn't watching Barack Obama at the Kamala Harris rally in Atlanta. But they said, you got to watch it. They sent me a time code. So Barack Obama campaigning for Kamala Harris, and he's bringing up the checks that Donald Trump sent out. Remember how controversial that was? During the pandemic, it was like the stimulus checks, that it was like Donald J. Trump, and the left lost its mind. Like, oh my gosh, this is an election year, and he's just trying to buy votes. And Barack Obama called him out for it on stage in Atlanta. Here it is.
Some folks will be like, well, Donald Trump sent me a check during the pandemic. No. Y'all know, because I've heard this. I know y'all, some of you heard that. Hey, let me make sure y'all understand this. Joe Biden sent you a check during the pandemic, just like I gave people relief during the Great Recession. The thing is, we didn't put our name on it because it wasn't about feeding our egos. It wasn't about advancing our politics. It was about helping people. That's the difference. Don't be giving them credit for that. Come on. He sent you a check. Do not fall for that okie doke. Don't be bamboozled.
Don't be bamboozled. I agree. Don't fall for that okie doke. Don't be bamboozled. But of course, the reason somebody sent it to me is we have another politician who is sending out checks with his name on them in an election year in a very transparent attempt to buy votes. Who was it? Bob Ferguson. Remember, Bob Ferguson started sending out these chicken checks. It wasn't he had sued these chicken and tuna companies for price fixing, and he could have very easily made the chicken and tuna companies give refunds or rebates to customers who had been, victimized by the price fixing and done that directly. But no, he said, you're going to give us the money. And then we're going to go out in my office and we're going to send checks to Washingtonians. And not only did he send checks with his name on it, he sent this letter along with it. And remember, this is right in the middle of his campaign for governor. Good news, you're receiving a refund. Tell me this doesn't scream campaign letter. As Attorney General, one of my top priorities is protecting consumers from fraud and deception. When corporations do not play by the rules, my team and I take action. And then he said, enclosed is a check for $120. I'm returning this money to Washingtonians like you who were most harmed by this illegal conduct. I mean, it just screams campaign letter. And the reason I know that for Bob Ferguson, this wasn't about getting money back in the hands of low-income people who'd been victimized by the price fixing of chicken and tuna companies is we know that hundreds, if not thousands of those checks went to people who never bought this chicken and tuna because they never had to prove that they bought the chicken and tuna to get a check. Hundreds of the checks, if it's any indication, we were sent dozens and dozens of examples of checks that were sent to people who were deceased. In one instance, somebody who'd been deceased for more than 40 years. Checks were sent to people who said that in no way, shape, or form could they be considered low income, that they were actually very wealthy and never should have gotten a check. And so it was very clear that for Bob Ferguson's office, they took very little care in making sure that these checks and these funds from these chicken and tuna companies from this lawsuit were sent very specifically to low-income families who were hoodwinked by these companies and spent more for canned chicken and tuna. If he had done that and had the companies actually make it right with the consumers and customers, we wouldn't have probably even talked about it at all. But it was like, give us the money. I'm going to take a cut for my office, and then I'm going to send checks with my name on it and this letter about how great I am and my office is out to people, and I'm just going to get them to as many people as possible in an election year. And let's again take it from Barack Obama when it comes to if those chicken checks are something that are influencing you to vote for Bob Ferguson.
He sent you a check. Do not fall for that okie doke. Don't be bamboozled.
Don't be bamboozled by Bob Ferguson and his chicken checks. I gotta love that. That is Barack Obama dissing Bob Ferguson.
I wish we had time to turn that into an ad for Dave.
Oh, well, I've turned it into a social media ad, which I found very nice. Okay. But it's just that perfect line he said is, when you do that, when you put your name on a check, he said, we sent out money. I didn't put my name on it because it wasn't about feeding my ego or getting attention to my political ambitions. And so it's like perfect because that's exactly what Bob Ferguson's doing. Feeding his egos, trying to help his political career. And it's not coming from me. It's coming from former President Barack Obama. Good stuff. Can't make up something that delicious. All right. Talking about budgets and being stretched thin. I know there are a lot of families out there who are just trying to figure out where can we cut. Everything is more expensive, gas, groceries. So have you thought about taking another look at your insurance? You might have done the kind of, name your own price thing. Can I say that? Is that copywritten?
I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm sure it is, but and thought, well, I did the best I can. But the truth is that the insurance industry is very complicated. Lord knows if you've got a home and a car or a business and all these things, there's a million different types of insurance that you can get between life insurance, all of this. And so having someone like Firstmark Insurance for free, take a look at your insurance, see if they can save you a little money, see if you're paying for insurance that you don't even need, see if you're undercovered in some areas. It really is just a no-brainer. We've heard from so many undivided viewers and listeners who've done the Firstmark Challenge. Tanya said, I wanted to let you know we're a new business in Long Beach, Washington. I bought a coffee cafe. We use Firstmark to find our insurance. It was the best choice we made. Michelle told us recently that she got a renewal notice from her existing provider, went from $3,000 to $8,000. So she promptly did the Firstmark Challenge with her husband, and they were able to save them more than 50%. She said we can now continue our discussions about getting a travel trailer. So there's no downside to the First Mark Challenge. It's completely free. You just have to set aside a little time to talk to them on the phone, go over your current insurance, talk about, what your needs are. They'll go out, they'll shop the market for you, and they'll come back with their proposal. And you never pay First Mark a dime for their services. So that is really one of the best parts, including the fact that they work for you, not the insurance companies. They're always going to do what's in your best interest. So firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. Again, very best part, they work for you. All right, talking about the election, a lot of this is going to be decided in King County and in Seattle, and that's just the reality of the state. That's where most of the population is, and so we are sometimes at the whim of Seattle voters when it comes to what they are prioritizing and what they think is important, and that's democracy, and that's just the way it works. Land doesn't vote, people vote. But there are definitely some people in the city of Seattle who have become outspoken voices for reason and common sense. One of them, his name is Matthew Humphrey. He owns Steel Barber in Ballard. And he came on the show with us first 2 years ago and really started to speak out, repercussions be damned, about what he was seeing outside his shop, about the rampant drug use, about the crime. There had been break-in after break-in, not just at his business, but at other businesses as well. And so he had started speaking up again 2-3 years ago, just saying we cannot continue to allow this to happen. And now, a week out from the election, he's reiterating that nothing has gotten better. And he's hoping that Seattle voters can wake up and decide that they're not going to put people back in office who are responsible for the downfall, really, of the city in so many ways. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. So Matthew Humphrey joined us yesterday on Sundays with Subscribers. Again, it had been 2 years since we had him on. The last time we had him on, he was talking about how horrible things had gotten in Ballard in particular. And so we invited him back in, and the cold, hard truth is things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. So in the last couple years, what was the most recent crime you were the victim of?
Right. So 3 days ago, I got broken into. A gang of 3 lowlifes pulled up right in front of my business and opened the door, cracked it with a big hammer, even though there's security glass on there. And my high-res cameras and my alarm system went off, and had a witness across the street call 911. The cops came an hour later, and they made off with $13,000 in retail in 2 minutes.
Is there anything that you think makes you a victim of this repeatedly? Is this an inside job? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's an inside job. I'm watching. We see people sometimes in the middle of the day come in that don't fit the picture. And Ballard's a pretty fun community because there's people from all walks. But you can always tell when we're getting cased. And it's not the same people that come back and do the caper. It's always someone different, but it feels repetitive in the sense that it happens to me about twice a year. So, and every time it's a loss, and anytime I use my insurance to try to cover the damages, they cancel it. So this time I'm faced with the same decision. Do I use my insurance to help me cover? Do I risk getting canceled and pay this increase in expense for insurance for the next 12 months? What do I do?
Yeah, you haven't made that decision this time?
I'm close. I think I'm going to do it. But the big cost really is just the aggravation and the post-traumatic stress. I don't sleep well. I'm a father of 3. They're the ones I should be worried about in the middle of the night, not my business constantly getting broken into.
Yeah, from the last time we spoke, now almost 2 years ago, has the city's response to these issues been any better?
It's hit and miss. The time before this, we got hit earlier this same year. And this was a gang of 3 women that looked like dog walkers on Ballard Ave, and they cased us and broke in and tried to steal a bunch of Aveda products on the wall and a bunch of barber jackets. And that time the police were there within 6 minutes, and I got there in 5. And every time what I'm faced with is frustration with the police too. They shrug their shoulders. They're like, yeah, Matt, we hate seeing this happen to you, but there's nothing we can do. So now I'm kind of in this position where I'm going to try to start solving my own crimes and try to prevent them. I'm like, my government is failing me. They're not doing their job.
What do you mean they can't help? There's nothing they can do. That's literally what they're there for. What do you think they mean when they say there's nothing we can do?
Resource-wise, to chase down like, let's say, for example, in this case, I had $13,000 worth of outerwear stolen. That's a pretty easy trace, right? You can see when they end up on the secondary market, Facebook Marketplace. Like my son, my 16-year-old son, is going to help me track these. You can bleep me, you know, what these guys do. And I think the resources is what the police are referring to when they say they wish they could help more. Like they, you know, the presence, there's no cops walking up and down the street. Most of the crimes happen between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. So even some of the neighbors were apologizing because they've seen my boarded up window. They've seen 2 more up the same street recently in the last 3 months. And we're all talking about hiring our own security. Ballot Alliance is a city group of businesses, and they supposedly have a person that goes up and down the street. But you know, their answer to the problem was hiring a full-time person to be preventative for crime. And I just thought that was asinine. And I sent, you know, emails to the head of Ballot Alliance. He's a great guy, but they just make terrible decisions.
Well, what do you think is asinine about that?
Well, I don't know how you got to stop the crime first. You got to have cops walking the beat. You got to have security first, and then work on a liaison to connect potential criminals with resources.
Oh, that's what you mean by preventative.
Yeah.
I thought you meant like preventative, like have somebody stationed outside the business. I'm like, that sounds like a pretty good idea.
No, it's the typical Seattle answer, which is let's kill them with kindness. Let's find a way to feed them and house them and you know, have them do fentanyl undercover so they don't get rained on. I'm just like, I can't take it one more minute.
I can't take it one more minute either. And I'm not even a business owner in Seattle. I mean, you know, we would love to be a business owner in Seattle. And I've said this before, probably because the state of things in Seattle, the lease spaces are so cheap there. And man, we could have got a like big, beautiful studio in Seattle and for super cheap, but it's like, it's not a safe place to be. And so in that sense, like I can only understand a little bit, but the video tells the story that Matthew Humphrey shares there. And this is years of this, right? And he was already dealing with it before he decided to speak out. You know, it had to get so bad for him to start speaking out about it 2-3 years ago. And now he just doesn't care. Like he's like, I will say whatever needs to be said. I don't care if I'm vilified or targeted or called right-wing or whatever it is, because this is just the truth. This is the truth of what's happening. Here's the video of what's happening. Here's my experience as a business owner. And I just feel for him, and I'm so proud of him for continuing to speak out, especially in a city where it can be really difficult to do so as a business owner, and you face repercussions for that. And look, I would say in Seattle, and to voters in Seattle, it's really not about Democrat versus Republican. I mean, in some ways it is, but you don't have a lot of Republican candidates in Seattle anyway. And so it's really about, I mean, we've talked about this before, not all Democrats are created equal. And there are Democrats who are out there messaging about public safety and have been consistent on that and about taking a more hard line on substance abuse and homelessness and homeless encampments and supportive of the police. And so you can still vote for someone who, you know, matches your values on a lot of stuff and a lot of social issues that still value just common sense stuff like public safety. We've got to do this. We can't continue or even go backward, God forbid, on the little progress that we have made at Seattle City Hall when it comes to actually at least acknowledging the problems that we're facing. So if you want to watch that full interview with Matthew Humphrey, you can do that by becoming a subscriber, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. It's just $5 a month. We'd love to have your support. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that. All right. In our segment Unbelievable today, I really wanted to focus on just how unbelievable the state of political discourse is in terms of, like, I'm not saying we don't have strong disagreements. I'm not saying that we get on this show and I'm like perfectly like kumbaya, everything's wonderful, and I don't have strong words for people that I disagree with on policy issues. Of course I do, but that's not really what it's about. It's about, can you control your freaking emotions? And can you exist in a world where other people might disagree with you without losing your damn mind? Let's discuss in our segment Unbelievable. Whoop, good grief. So I've got a trifecta of stories that just are examples of people not being able to cope in a world where there are people who disagree with their politics. And this is getting more and more frequent, certainly. There's this guy, and we're going to try to get him on the show. If you're a fan of the show and you happen to be watching this, please reach out to us, undividedpod.com. There's a little contact form because we would love to freaking talk to you about it. So his name is Dave Wick. This is from the News Tribune. He had what did he commit? The cardinal sin of wearing a Trump shirt in Washington State. The headline, man wearing Trump shirt asked to leave popular Tacoma breakfast spot, saying it hit me hard. And I'm actually surprised. I'm proud of the News Tribune for doing this story. And here's the tale they tell. Dave Wick just wanted some Eggs Benedict and a Bloody Mary on Thursday morning. Who doesn't? I want to be friends with him if he's having Bloody Marys on a Thursday morning. At one of his favorite Tacoma restaurants, the Hobnob. Instead, he was shown the door. The reason? He was wearing a pro-Trump shirt. The meal began innocuously as a server seated the pair and brought them water. Quote, as she's walking away, she did a quick turnaround, Wick recalled. A few moments later, the server returned and told Wick that his shirt was making her uncomfortable. According to Wick, the server told him he either had to leave or get his food to go. He asked to see the manager. He says the manager came up. He said, because his waitress feels uncomfortable, he's not going to make them serve me. So this restaurant is owned by a company called Sound Restaurant Family. They told the News Tribune in a statement they were unaware of the incident until the News Tribune asked for comment. Robin Nielsen, a spokesperson for the chain, expressed regret over Wick's treatment. We want to be a safe place for everyone who comes, regardless of beliefs, expression, or anything else. As long as they're being respectful and no hate, then you belong in our restaurant, and it sounds like that didn't happen today. So I'm glad to hear Sound Restaurant Family saying that, and this seems like something that happened within one of their restaurants with a waitress and the manager. So in case you're listening to the show and not watching, the shirt that Dave Wick was wearing was the scene of Donald Trump after the first assassination attempt, where he gets up and puts his fist in the air and it says, fight, fight, fight. That is it's just the fact that it's a Trump shirt, pro-Trump shirt, that's making her uncomfortable. There's nothing inherently about the shirt that would make someone rational feel uncomfortable, because it's like he's standing up saying fight, fight, fight after somebody tried to shoot him. It's not like it has some hateful sort of remarks or words on it or something like that. But frankly, I think that this is one of the reasons I think Trump's going to do better in Washington than people believe. I believe that people are genuinely fearful about expressing their support for Donald Trump publicly because of things like this. I think there are probably, even in my neighborhood, people who'd have a Trump sign up if they didn't think that the reaction would be unhinged to it, or that their neighbors would feel a certain way about them. I really think, have I said this? Did I just say this? I think Trump's going to get over 40% in Washington.
I like it.
I do. I believe Trump's going to get over 40% in Washington.
I think he definitely could.
And people are, this is just ridiculous. And it shows, look, especially if you're in the service industry, yeah, we're in a blue state, but if you really can't continue to do your job and feel safe if someone comes in wearing a political shirt or logo you disagree with, that's not healthy. Do we understand that that's just not a healthy way of going about life? And I don't know if this restaurant is going to fire that server or what it is. And I'm not saying that she should get fired, but she really needs to sit down and talk to someone about her feelings. Because I mean, honestly, though, if you can't exist in a space with someone who disagrees with you politically, that's something that you need to work out, because that's not a healthy, happy way to live your life. So that's just sad. And then we get into the desperation and the cruelty, I think, of some, particularly on the left in Washington, who have a really hard time. I mean, Republicans have chosen to live in this environment where they're in a blue state. They're used to being around people who disagree with them. They're used to having politicians who represent them in Olympia who they disagree with. That's just a fact of life for them. But as Republicans start to get a little bit of momentum and the initiatives start to get some momentum, this is a new experience for the left, where they're feeling threatened, I think, in a real way for the first time, and they're lashing out in a way that's really hostile and very concerning. So you've met our friend Vijay Boyapati. He just, a month ago? So he's a former Google engineer, tech entrepreneur. He lives on Capitol Hill. And just a month ago, he got involved in the Yes On Initiative 2109 campaign, the initiative to repeal the tax on capital gains, because of his personal experience. And he's so kind. We had him on the show on Sundays with Subscribers. He's been doing some rounds. He was on NPR. He was on King 5. I mean, the guy is so freaking lovable. that, in the way he tells his story, he's an immigrant to this country. He got to experience the American dream by being involved in tech and working for a company that did so well. And that's really the personal story that he's been out there telling. Like nothing hateful, nothing vitriolic, just saying, hey, as an immigrant, having no tax on capital gains is what drew me to Washington State. It's what helped me achieve my American dream, building businesses and selling them. And I think that the capital gains tax, as he puts it, is going to rob other people of their American dream. It dissuades entrepreneurship. It dissuades business growth. And of course, one of the things he's pointed out is the truth that the capital gains tax is their way to get to an income tax. So eventually the capital gains tax is just going to apply to all of you. And that's one of the big things. So what happens to Vijay Boyapati for the crime of sharing his story? What does the left call it? His lived experience. What happens to Vijay Boyapati for the crime of, for the last 3 weeks, sharing his lived experience with Washington voters? Well, he gets targeted, harassed, and threatened in his very own neighborhood. So as I said, he lives on Capitol Hill. He's got little kids and a wife. And he ventures out in his neighborhood and finds signs plastered all over the place with his face on them. And it says, Vijay Boyapati is pushing for a tax break for himself that will gut funding for schools. That's just greedy. Learn more at wallofshamewa.com. Can you imagine being in your neighborhood where you're raising your kids, where you're walking with your family to dinner, to a coffee shop, or to the park, and there are posters like that plastered all over your neighborhood, trying to intimidate and shame and vilify you for sharing your simple story about being an immigrant to this country who is able to do well and who wants other people to do well too. Those are the tactics of the far left in our state. And Vijay is not the first one who's been vilified with these posters. Brian Haywood's on the posters. There's several other Republican donors who have ended up on this wall of shame that the far left pays for. But when you're talking about someone like Vijay, who, yes, willingly, he probably knew the risks of coming and speaking out, in favor of 2109. But is this really acceptable? That the consequence of doing that is you'll be targeted in your own neighborhood where you're raising your kids, and you'll be vilified. And that's the goal of this, right? Is to intimidate him, to make him fearful for himself and his family so that he stops speaking out. That's the goal of this, make no mistake. And that is a tactic that we see on the left. What happened when we were collecting signatures for the initiatives? The state Democratic Party and its proxies were pushing out tip lines saying, report lawful signature gatherers, take a picture of them, report what they're wearing and what they look like. So what? You can go out and harass and intimidate them and expose them? It's a completely unacceptable tactic. And honestly, to me, it should be one big fat reason to vote yes on the initiatives, is the amount of horrible harassment, intimidation, and vilification that the left has ruled out as a way to keep all this money coming into its coffers. They would harass and intimidate a father in his neighborhood where he's raising his kids. Like, is that the side that you want to be on? So that's just really unhinged. Like, put your own people on TV. If you don't like Vijay Boyapati sharing his story on King 5 and NPR, get in touch with King 5 and NPR. Say, hey, we have someone who's in favor of the capital gains tax, and we'd love to do an interview with you. I mean, you already are spending millions of dollars in ads all over TV, spreading the lie that it would gut funding for schools. That's just not true. In fact, there was one ad in particular. It's just horrible. I don't know if you've seen it, and I'm not 100% sure who's paying for it, if it's Defend Washington or one of those related groups. It literally has this woman talking about like special education. And it has a young boy with Down syndrome that they're showing in this ad. And essentially the message is, if you vote yes on the initiative to repeal capital gains, you're hurting this little boy with Down syndrome. And it's like the most disgusting mind manipulation and emotional manipulation, that they want you to believe that they absolutely need this money from the tax on capital gains to be able to fund our schools and help kids with special needs like Down syndrome. To which I would say the income from capital gains is brand new. Like, the state of our public schools is because of 40 years of Democratic rule. The Democrats have been in charge of the education system for a very long time. So if it was in a state of disarray before they started getting money from the tax on capital gains, that's their fault. I don't know how you can blame that on someone like Vijay Boyapati, who's like in the last 3 weeks speaking out on these issues. The final of our stories, we talked about Andrea Suarez, the Democrat running against a socialist in the 43rd Legislative District in Seattle. Well, these far left lunatics continue to go out and en masse kick down, tear up her signs and throw them in dumpsters. We had some videos of it and brazen. Like this guy posted this, or girl, I don't know, on their TikTok, going around Seattle, ripping up Andrea Suarez signs, which is a crime, of course, and then putting him in the back of their car, and then they'll burn them or put them in a dumpster. And I think this is the video, right, where they actually pull out a pair of scissors. It's about to happen. And they're like, it's not even enough to look at this absolutely unhinged lunatic. Look how many signs. I mean, that's got to be 20 signs. Pulls out a scissors and starts cutting these signs, which is destruction of property, which is obviously crime. Think about how unhinged mentally you have to be so upset that a politician you don't agree with had the audacity. Look at that. How much time do you think it took that person to cut up all those Andrea Suarez signs? There has to be a way to find out who that is. Has to be a way. It's a crime. But it's also more than that. We know it's a crime. It is unhinged. It is very easy. I'll tell you how to do it, okay? Let's say that this is a Bob Ferguson sign. Okay, here it is. Bob Ferguson. Great. Let's say I'm on a walk. And I see a Bob Ferguson sign. Oh, Bob Ferguson, ew. You just keep walking. You see how easy that is? You know, I don't have to like the sign, but I'm not going to rip it out of the ground. In fact, I put a Bob Ferguson sign back in the ground the other day. I should have taken a video of it and showed how righteous I am. But no, it was really windy out. I had just put a Dave Reichert one back up near my yoga studio, and the Bob Ferguson one was in the street, and I thought, you know, I could use some karma today. Good karma. So I took that little guy and I put it right back in the ground. Like I shouldn't have done that, but I'm a good person. Under no obligation. But it's like, I can't imagine that mindset. It's unhealthy. And anybody who does that, I'm going to vote the exact opposite of the way they're voting. Like that's obviously a Sean Scott supporter, right? Supporting a socialist. Mm-hmm. If that's your mindset, like then that tells me that that's not the person we need in Olympia to go work on our behalf. You really think Sean Scott's going to be able to be a lawmaker for everyone when those are his people going around town, ripping up signs, throwing them in dumpsters, spending hours on end, cutting them into little pieces so they can never be used again? Like, come on. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and it is only going to get worse if Orange Man Bad wins the presidency and if some of these races in Seattle don't go the way that these far leftists want them to go. Unreal. I don't see videos like that from the right. Show me a video. I mean, my first thought would be you manufactured a video to show a MAGA person like the Jussie Smollett syndrome. We're not getting sent videos. I'm not seeing videos on social media. I'm getting sent a lot of videos of people ripping out yes on initiative signs and Trump signs. I saw this Trump. I'm kind of surprised to see Trump Vance signs anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And there was one on my way to my yoga studio. And so I'd seen it the day before, and then someone on both sides put a Harris Walls sign and sandwiched it in the middle, which I think, I don't know if that's illegal, but it's like, at least you didn't rip it out, but like still it was like sandwiched so you couldn't even read it anymore. And I was like, oh, good gravy.
That seems pretty,
Yeah, I don't think you can obstruct them, but it's smart, but I do still think it might be illegal. But it's just like, get a grip. You realize, like, you look, that person who posts those videos, you think that you're so righteous or like, oh, this is really cool. No, you look unhinged. And I'm actually genuinely concerned about your mental health and well-being. Unbelievable. All right, let's see. We're going to get to some national news. First, our friend Wes Jones, wonderful real estate agent in this area. I realize, real estate agent isn't something that you're going to need every single month or every single year. It's going to be just a couple times in your life, and you want to make sure that you pick a good one. Wes Jones has been doing this for a long time, helping people in this area sell their homes. He's been through all the ups and downs in the market. He's a great guy. He knows what he's doing. That's why retired Seattle police officer Mike Boggs reached out to Wes Jones when he went to sell his home after 30 years to retire to Arizona.
So the concerns were, is it presentable enough to sell quickly to get the price we want? Wes came out and met with us, and we told him what our concerns were. And he mentioned the concierge service, and we did take advantage of it. It was such an easy process. Wes is a really great guy, and his team is amazing, and the communication is great. So the whole process was great.
Yeah, and Wes, we've heard so many stories like that from Undivided viewers and listeners. He's our guy. So if you're in the market to sell your home, start by using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, so there was this whole Madison Square Garden rally that Donald Trump had yesterday, and I know it's covered a lot nationally and all over social media, so we're not going to dive into it too terribly much. I mean, the crowd was huge. And this is the thing, is like, oh, the two sides are always back and forth about, oh, look how big Kamala Harris's crowd was, and oh, look how big Donald Trump's crowd was, and oh, okay, what I'll say about Donald Trump's crowds, they're big without having to have A-list celebrity recording artists there. Like, was she in Houston? I think Kamala Harris was in Houston.
Might have been Dallas, but yes.
Yeah, Beyonce
Texas.
was there, and Beyonce's from Texas. And I think some people were really upset because they thought Beyonce was going to perform. Instead, they waited all this time, and Beyonce spoke for like 3 minutes and then left. And people are like, look at this huge packed arena for Kamala Harris. I'm like, people, you really think they're there for Kamala Harris? Some of them, yes. But come on. Like, even if it was like Adele, God forbid Adele endorsed Kamala Harris, I don't know, I'd have such a crisis of conscience. But if it was like, oh, Kamala Harris is going to be in Seattle and Adele's going to be there, I would wait 7 hours in line to go to a Kamala Harris rally to see Adele. I totally would. So you really, that's the thing.
With our
like,
Trump signs.
I probably wouldn't have a Trump sign because I wouldn't want to be physically assaulted by Antifa. But it's like this whole laughable thing is like, yeah, Donald Trump has some celebrities that show up, but they're not A-list recording artists like Beyonce that already packs arenas on her own. Anyway, so the whole Hitler thing, again, unhinged. It's concerning. I'm worried about the mental health crisis in this country. But they, of course, so like 80 years ago, was it, or 90 years ago, or 80 years ago, at Madison Square Garden, allegedly, apparently, there was some pro-Hitler rally. And so, of course, the unhinged left-wing media is like, oh, it's the same thing. 80 years later, Donald Trump's having a Hitler rally because Kamala Harris is likening him to Hitler, which is just so utterly offensive to Jewish people. And I saw this like Holocaust survivor whose parents were murdered in the Holocaust when he was a little boy who was saying, please stop doing that. So MSNBC, not only do they have insane chyrons, like the lower thirds that were saying like, Trump Hitler rally, or like 80 years after Hitler, like insane stuff. But they leaned into this narrative full steam.
But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, Adolf Hitler, packed the garden for a so-called pro-America rally. A rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners.
Oh my God.
When a Jewish protester rushed the stage, the Associated Press reported, quote, instantly, a dozen or more stormtroopers set upon him, knocking him down and beating him as he held his head in his arms. Most of his clothing was torn from his body. Later, he was booked for disorderly conduct. Now, against that backdrop of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants, is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism.
That's as bad as it gets. That's scary stuff. I mean, I could laugh about it and be like, that's really scary stuff. Not on Donald Trump's part, on the media's part. And not to mention, there were so many Jewish people at this rally who spoke, who are supporting Donald Trump because the other side has shown that it is either anti-Semitic or willing to completely ignore acts of anti-Semitism that are far more in line with what Hitler was saying and doing. I mean, that's disgusting. And to liken Hitler or the Holocaust and those views and his fascism to Donald Trump wanting to carry out deportations of people who came into this country illegally, like people who committed a crime to come here, some who've committed crimes while here, and you're vilifying what I would say is a fairly mainstream opinion that they should be deported with Hitler and Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. This takes a lot for me to say this because I believe in the First Amendment. that I don't know how you could have an FCC license. I hate to say that, because I believe in speech, even if it's, speech I disagree with. But when you look at, there are reasons you can lose your FCC license for much less than that. That whole thing is really troubling and disturbing. And again, with just days left until the election, I mean, their goal there is obviously very clear. I'll say I was really proud of New York Mayor Eric Adams. Obviously, there's this press conference going on, and there's a ton of people coming in for this. So it's sort of a public safety, police, NYPD issue that they have to plan for. Anytime you have that big of an event with that much, with a former president that has been the subject of 2 assassination attempts in recent months, it's going to be, notable for the city, where the mayor is going to come out and police are going to come out and say, hey, here's how we're dealing with this. But Mayor Adams absolutely, I think, first of all, he's shown to be very reasonable, but he put cold water on the Democratic narrative that Trump is like Hitler and this is a Hitler or Nazi rally.
I have been had those terms hurled at me by some political leaders in the city, using terms like Hitler and fascist. My answer is no. I know what Hitler has done, and I know what a fascist regime looks like. I think, as I've called over and over again, that the level of conversation, I think we could all dial down the temperature. And I've heard people say that the former president should not be able to have a rally in Madison Square Garden. I strongly disagree. This is America. This is New York. And I think it's important that we allow individuals to exercise their right to get their message clear to New Yorkers. And our job as a city and as a police department is to make sure they could do that in a peaceful way. I think that we must be extremely cautious. The heat we turn up today, pre-election, is going to have to be the heat we're going to have to govern in. And I think we need to show a level of respectable communication. And so when people called me fascist and other terminologies, I didn't like it. And I don't think it's fitting to anyone to state that the former president is equal to being Hitler.
Good for him. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, is why he was indicted, because he says stuff like that. And he came out after and he criticized some of the things that were said at Madison Square Gardens, which I agree with that. For instance, Donald Trump had Kill Tony, who's a comedian, on, and he had this dumb joke about Puerto Rico being a floating thing of garbage, which I get it. The right's all about like, hey, tell your jokes and it's just a joke. And I get it. But, a few days to the election, you're in a city with a lot of Puerto Ricans, and there are states like Florida where you're going to really rely on Puerto Ricans to do well. So maybe calling their island like a floating pile of garbage isn't the best joke for electoral reasons, but also, there's a lot of people who are going to find it offensive. So yeah, there were some misses at the rally for sure, but likening it to Hitler or the Nazis, because again, it's just stupid. What is the video? What was the try that in a small town? Yes. Remember when that music video came out and they filmed it in front of a courthouse, the Jason Aldean video, and then immediately the left-wing media is like, that courthouse was the scene of lynchings like 100-something years ago. And I'm like, so because he's at a location that he probably was completely oblivious to some random trial that happened, I think it was like 100 years prior or even more, he is doing it intentionally to set that scene. And it's like, how many things happen at Madison Square Gardens? It's like, oh no, Trump's there. So obviously he's hearkening back to the 85 years ago Nazi rally. It's dumb stuff, but it's scary stuff. Meanwhile, Michael Rappaport, so he's an actor and a comedian. You're probably familiar with him, but he's not a Trump fan, hasn't been a Trump fan, says some pretty nasty things about Trump. But even he's said that, man, when it comes to policy, like he might have to vote for Trump, and he's Jewish. So he's been very frustrated with how the left has dealt with the rise in anti-Semitism and, the media's coverage of the October 7 terror attack on Israel. He came out and talked about these Hitler-Trump comparisons.
Do not refer to Hitler and the Holocaust, the actual greatest slaughter and actual genocide of the Jewish people ever, for attention and political gain. Stop it. That Nazi rally that took place in Madison Square Garden in 1939 was just that, an actual true blue Nazi rallies. What kind of rallies are happening on the college campuses in New York City, in Union Square, where they're waving Hamas flags and kissing Yahya Sinwar photos? What kind of rallies are that? Do not mention the Holocaust, Hitler, to score political points when you ignore the greatest slaughter of Jews since the actual Holocaust, which happened on October 7th. All this Hitler talk, all this Holocaust talk, with so little Holocaust studies in schools. Do not bring up Hitler and Nazis when there are 101 hostages. 101 hostages, and you say nothing about them. Cut the shit. Do not use Nazis and Hitler for your agenda when you haven't mentioned the 13 women that are still being held captive today while you're wearing your futurist female t-shirt. It's disgusting. It's disrespectful to the victims and survivors of the Holocaust and to the real-time victims and survivors and the hostages of October 7th. Stop it.
Amen. We like that. That's so good. But he, and that can be applied to so many different things. And he makes such a good point is like you have these actual acts of anti-Semitism and like Hamas worship on our college campuses, and the media downplays them. They make excuses for them. The Democratic Party downplays them. They make excuses for them. Bob Ferguson, Jay Inslee, they were nowhere to be found when there were acts of anti-Semitism on the campus of the alma mater at the University of Washington. And I said all along, had they been right-wing Trump rallies that were being anti-Semitic, they would have had a press conference day one, and they wouldn't have rested until every single one of them was removed from that campus promptly. And so you take that kind of like picking and choosing of what anti-Semitism, like blatant, clear, unapologetic anti-Semitism on the left, ignore it. Trump has a rally at a place where anti-Semites had a rally 85 years ago. Oh, same thing. And it's like January 6th. Yeah, January 6th was embarrassing, but January 6th came after 7-8 months of left-wing rioting, destruction, and murder across the entire country, which the media downplayed. I mean, I was a member of the media at the time. I would like watch my own news station downplaying things that I had been there to see and witness with my own eyes. I mean, cop cars on fire and taking over police precincts, and we're treating that with kid gloves, but then January 6th is the worst thing to happen to this country since Pearl Harbor. So it's just insane. Good for Michael Rappaport. All right, one more thing I want to talk about national news before we move on. The Washington Post decided all LA Times not to endorse a presidential candidate. And their staff and Democrats in America lost their minds. So the Washington Post newsroom did a story on the decision not to endorse, while Post says it will not endorse a candidate for president. Publisher William Lewis explained the decision as a return to the newspaper's roots. So it's the first time that the WaPost editorial board has not made an endorsement in the presidential contest for 36 years. They say they are also going to discontinue that practice. So they're not going to make endorsements, they claim, in future presidential races. Quote, this is from, again, a quote from William Lewis, the publisher. We recognize that this will read in a range of ways, including as a tactic endorsement of one candidate or as a condemnation of another or as an abdication of responsibility. That's inevitable. We don't see it that way. We see it as consistent with the values the Post has always stood for and what we hope for in a leader: character and courage in service to the American ethic, veneration of the rule of law, and respect for human freedom in all its aspects. Lewis also portrayed the decision as a statement in support of our readers' ability to make up their own minds. Well, the internet full-fledged lost it, and to which I understand the difference between an editorial section and an opinion page in the newsroom. Sometimes those lines get blurred where, an editorial page will make an endorsement and people believe that it reflects poorly, which I do think in a way it does, on the news staff. Sometimes it's hard to have that be a very clear line for readers. So I understand why some newspapers have chosen, given the state of political discourse, we're just not going to get involved in this one. But the fact that you have Democrats getting so mad at just a decision to stay neutral shows what their expectation, what they've come to expect of the mainstream media in America. There's an expectation from the onset that the media is going to be on their side. So even when the media decides just to remain neutral, that's an affront to them. That's an offense to them. That's some horrible, awful thing. And I saw the two legendary journalists, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, they released a statement about this. We respect the traditional independence of the editorial page, but this decision 11 days out from the 2024 presidential election ignores the Washington Post's own overwhelming reporting on the threat Donald Trump poses to democracy. Under Jeff Bezos' ownership, the Washington Post news operation has used its abundant resources to rigorously investigate the danger and damage a second Trump presidency could cause to the future of American democracy. And that makes this decision even more surprising and disappointing, especially this late in the electoral process. So even two people who are held up to be the epitome of good journalism are releasing a statement angry that an an opinion page decided not to take a position in a race. When they're even saying like the WAPO's newsroom has done a good job covering Trump and his threats to democracy. So why isn't that good enough? Why do you then need the opinion page from your journalistic perspective to take a position? And then all these people were out, like, and not just random internet users, like prominent Democratic talking heads, etc. Were out there. Keith Olbermann, George Conway, Susan Wright posting these, we canceled your subscription. So like their screenshots of they went and canceled their subscription to the Washington Post, and then as like a badge of honor tweeted it out. To which I'm thinking, that doesn't make you look sane. That makes you look insane. Because again, but that's their mindset, right? They're so used to the media, whether it's an opinion page or a newsroom being 100% on their side, that anything perceived as dissent is an offense to them, where they'll throw a tantrum and cancel a subscription. And by all means, you're welcome to subscribe or not subscribe to whatever you want to or don't want to. But the fact that this is what sent them over the edge, that it was a position, it was a non-position. It was a decision for a news entity to remain neutral, which most people think a news entity should in the first place. But no, not for Democrats. Neutral is an attack on them because they're so used to the alternative. All right. I'll get to our daily subscriber show poll and questions, comments, and sanity check in a moment. First, our friend Zach Abraham at Bulwark Capital. They're having another one of their live Know Your Risk webinars. This one's coming up November 21st. 3:30 p.m., totally free. You just go to knowyourriskradio.com. This little thing will pop up on the screen and you can register for it. And what they're going to do is look at, everything that's happening. And after that, that'll be post-election, right? So we'll have a better idea of what's happening nationally, how it's impacting what's happening globally. And they're going to talk to you about how those events could impact your retirement portfolio and how they at Bulwark Capital specialize in managing risk. So Zach Abraham, Bulwark's analyst, they are constantly looking at what's happening globally and nationally and then adjusting to that volatile world so that it doesn't unduly impact your retirement portfolio. They want to shield it from risk as much as possible because risk management is Bulwark's number one focus. The webinar is also a perfect, no obligation way for you to get to know them, have all your questions answered, and then leave maybe a little bit less anxious. Remember, you only get one retirement. So do not trust it to someone who is not actively managing and trying to mitigate your risk. So don't miss Zach's in-depth retirement portfolio free live webinar Thursday, November 21st. Register right now at knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. Okay, I want to get to our daily subscriber show poll, which I think I've asked a similar question to this in the subscriber poll, but I wanted to ask it again in light of what happened in Vancouver and Portland with these arson attacks on ballot drop boxes. Because again, as I said, I've touted drop boxes as the better option, certainly to USPS. So I asked subscribers on Patreon, Locals, and X, do you put your ballot in a drop box or return it via U.S. mail? Nicole, I think I asked you this last week. What's your answer?
Well, because I had plenty of time to track my ballot, so I returned it via USPS.
Yeah, so you could track it. And that's the thing.
It's been accepted. It's been accepted. All good.
Yeah, mine has too. It took a little longer than I thought it was. But 77% of you on Patreon are saying that you use a Dropbox, 21% USPS. I also gave you other as an option because I know some people bring it straight in. They don't trust anybody, so they hand it over. That's what MB said. I bring it in from now on. Jen Ram said I took it into the elections office. Jack says, bring back in-person voting. How lazy are we? I'm pretty lazy. I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty lazy.
I thought the Florida early voting in person is pretty cool. I think we could bring that back at least and just have it be in addition to mail-in balloting.
Like you can make a choice, you mean? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'd still have ballot drop boxes that would be at risk. Very similar breakdown over on locals. Weiss Council says, I guess we don't know if we can assign a motive to only 2 events. Both are bad, talking about these attacks. But overall, it's a greater symptom of the permissive treatment to young vandals. In Seattle and Portland, you can do something knowing the punishment and it won't be severe. 100%. Like the vandals who are ripping up Andrea Suarez signs. They don't think they're ever going to get in trouble for that. They're so emboldened by it. They post it on social media. Michelle says, Dropbox always, but I'm now concerned about that too. More reasons to go back to in-person, same-day voting. Yeah, a lot of people over on Patreon saying like State Classy 71, drop mine at the elections HQ inside the building. So that's probably a much safer ballot drop box than outside.
Or the most safe, I guess.
We had that picture of the ballot drop box in Ballard. Where like, yeah, it wasn't lit on fire, but there was a dude doing fentanyl who'd stacked all his like dirt and drugs and garbage on it. And it's like, well, that's not
laying in front of it.
Yeah, he was laying in front of it. Like, that's not the drop box. I'm not stepping over the guy ODing on fentanyl to drop my ballot in the drop box, although that should be a big red flashing neon sign of making sure you vote for someone else. Chris, I can't read your comment, but I did read it. It's just inappropriate to read on the live show. And I use the drop box at the courthouse in Port Townsend. Oh, that's good. Yeah, my local drop box is outside a library, but it still is outside. So yeah, there's a lot of options, but just something to think about. And either way, just get it in and then track the darn thing until you know that it's been counted. All right, questions, comments. Son Miller TTT, Triple T, with $20 super chat. 3 snorts during tea time on Sundays with Subscribers. Too much fun. Great show yesterday. Nicole and I had an unhinged Sundays with Subscribers.
It was a
Nicole
little
was
different.
dropping shit, and we were having fun though.
It was good.
Yeah, many a snort. Many a snort. Sister Golden Hair. I've never read a comment from Sister Golden Hair. Crazy. I bring my ballot to the Pierce County Elections office now. I walk right into the building and put it into the ballot box in their building. I don't trust the boxes out on the streets or the USPS. Brian Manzo. Will Inslee or Ferguson speak out against this or remain silent? I haven't checked their social media accounts. They may as well have.
But I'll look right now.
Marie Glusenkamp-Perez and Joe Kent were talking about this on their social media. Because again, I don't know. Within Vancouver, there are certainly going to be districts that are more red or more blue. And the same in Portland. There are going to be districts in Portland, same as Seattle, that have a tendency to vote a little more moderate. So I don't know. Look, I don't know who did it. I have my suspicions, again, based on a lot of experience with who does stuff like this in this area. Hidden Coast. This may affect the race. Republicans are turning out early and likely Republican ballots were in the box and burnt. Reagan, this is insane. I hope these people are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but honestly, it's doubtful. I'm glad the FBI is in on it, but hopefully not in on it, on the investigation.
Nothing from Bob or Jay.
Interesting. Let me see here. Linda, that's why we're dropping our ballots off at the courthouse. Hopefully that's safer. Deb ZJ on the state of discourse. Personally, I believe the mental crisis card is being overplayed. Most of these kinds of issues are the result of drug usage. Talking about like people who are ripping up signs and stuff. I don't know if that's drug use. I think that's like TDS / anti-Republican animus. Baron of Gray Matter, $5 super chat. The motto of the left is by any means necessary. They're unhinged and panicked. Vote yes, pay less. Vote smarter, Washington. The left will cheat. And not everyone on the left is like that. Not every Democrat is like that. I have a lot of Democratic friends who they're not going to walk by a Dave Reichert sign and rip it out of the ground. But there is a segment of the far left socialist fringe in Seattle and in Washington state and progressives who they are very frightened by what they see as with the initiatives like a possible attack on some of their unions like SEIU that benefits from the long-term care program. So they want that to stay intact, even though it's a worthless program for real people. The teachers union when it comes to capital gains. So they are, they'll go and threaten and intimidate you in your own neighborhood if it means keeping all the money that they have coming into their unions.
And I do think what he means by left will cheat. Maybe what he means is the lying in the commercials. I mean, to me, that's totally, cheating. Absolutely cheating. Yes, it's a legal cheat. It's legal cheating, but it's cheating.
100%.
People.
Well, 100%, and it's an attack on our democracy. Speaking of,
absolutely,
I'm gonna make a 25. Yeah, I'm gonna do that tonight. So Nicole's like, no, you're not.
No, it's funny. I think you're like, do I have something else I need to do tonight?
I bet you I can come up with a list of 25 ways that Democrats have attacked democracy this year.
Oh, yeah. I bet we can do that easy.
Easy day. Let me see here. Baron of Gray Matter, let me get in some super chats quick. Mark Halperin believes if Trump wins, there will be the largest mental health crisis in the USA. The left will be unable to process it. Mine's lost, which I was supposed to go visit my friend Johnny after the elections, like not the weekend after, but after that. And I'm thinking I might want to wait and see how the elections pan out before I commit to going to New York City. Eric Vasquez with a 999 super chat. It was my birthday on Saturday and wanted to go door knocking, but came down with a bad cold. Fortunately, my mom has convinced a few neighbors and our grocery clerk to vote Reichert, and yes on all four. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Eric Vasquez. Happy birthday to you. I wrapped it this time.
And I couldn't even compete with that because I didn't know where you were going.
Went into a wrap. Lucky. My dogs are here today. Lucky.
They're being so good, and now
That's
you're
okay.
going to disturb.
We're almost done with the show. Lucky.
You know, I had some, while we're waiting for Lucky, I feel like I had some really encouraging conversations this weekend.
Oh, I wanted to see if they heard her little toe taps. Come here. Oh. Tell them about your conversations while I show off my dog.
I talked to some people connected with OSPI in previous leadership, and they are not big fans of Kruse, and they're all voting for David. And then I had some Democrats tell me they were voting for Reichert, and I had my niece's union rep walked into her work and said, "Hey y'all, we're voting Republican this year. That's it."
Oh, I love that.
And I was like, that's amazing. So yeah. I needed a little lift this weekend, and that was my lift for the weekend.
Yeah. 100%. Like sometimes hearing those things is enough to just keep you going.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Lucky, for making an appearance with your little wiggly tail. Tiffany, if you have that much time on your hands to rip a bunch of signs and cut up all the hard plastic, then they don't have a job and still live with your parents. 100%. Lucky, I let you in under the condition that you be well behaved. Oh my God. What did I do? Mac. I'm sorry, because Mac's deaf and she doesn't know. Girls, come over here though. Sorry guys, we're almost done with the show. Now they're going to turn off the computer or something. Okay, come on. One more, Sergeant Pickles, 49 super chat. If Fergie wins and they gain a supermajority, my wife and I have agreed to an exit plan. Family has lived in Sumner since 1909, but this is too much.
Wow.
Don't leave, Sergeant Pickles. Don't leave. All right, before Lucky steps on the off button for the computer, let's get to our closing sanity check, shall we? We have a long day at work today. I wanted to bring the pups. I had no choice. Mike's hunting, so I couldn't leave the dogs at home all day. All right. So I think one of the things this speaks to one of the reasons I'm voting for Donald Trump in the election, and one of the reasons why I've been so gung-ho about trying to get a little bit of balance into what's happening in Washington state is it's not necessarily individual candidates on the Democratic side. It's what they're starting to represent. It's this hungry for power by any means necessary, as was pointed out earlier, in ways that are an affront to our constitutional rights, like free speech, in ways that are very clear attempts to undermine our democracy and to quash dissent. And Donald Trump said as much during his rally over the weekend.
We're running against something far bigger than Joe or Kamala, and far more powerful than them, which is a massive, vicious, crooked, radical left machine that runs today's Democrat Party. They're just vessels.
Yeah, and it's more than that, just the Democratic machine. It's the media as well. You look at everything in this state, for instance, Democrats have built over 40 years and how massive it is and how much money they have and how much power and influence they have, the lies they're willing to tell on TV, the lies the media will let them get away with. And what I see is something that's becoming more and more dangerous by the day. So it's not even necessarily about Bob Ferguson or about individual candidates who I'm opposed to. It's about what those candidates represent. That has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's episode of Undivided. We would love your support before the election. If you've enjoyed any of the coverage that we've had on the show, any of the candidate interviews or anything like that, we would love your support for just $5 a month. It's how Nicole and I do this show full time. You can sign up for $5 a month at undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. Am I forgetting something? Oh my God. We don't have any events scheduled from now until election day.
But thanks to everybody that came out in the rain.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We were in Stillicum over the weekend doing door knocking and sign waving. Thank you so much to everyone who came out in the pouring rain to be part of that. I mean, it was really meaningful. And thank you to everyone who came to one of our Day of Action events that we've had over the last month. And hopefully it makes you feel a little bit better about contributing and going out there and trying to win on behalf of candidates you believe in. It's much more fulfilling than sitting behind a microphone or a computer screen just whining and crying and shit posting. Makes you feel like you did something meaningful, you know? All right, we'll see you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. How does that sound? Girls, yes? Doggies? You cool with that? Okay, that's it. All right, bye-bye.